There are moments in life when a single decision made in the span of a heartbeat can alter the entire trajectory of your existence. For Marcus Reed, that moment came on a rainy Tuesday evening at a cheap diner on the outskirts of Denver when he chose to stand up for a stranger instead of looking away. He had no idea that his simple act of kindness would ripple outward like a stone thrown into still water, eventually returning to him in ways he could never have imagined. Marcus was exhausted that night, the kind of bone-deep tiredness that comes from working two jobs while raising a 7-year-old daughter alone. His shift at the warehouse had run late, and he'd barely made it to pick up Emma from after-school care before they closed. Now they sat in a worn vinyl booth at Ruby's Diner, the only place still serving food at 9 o'clock that he could afford. Emma colored on the paper placemat with crayons the waitress had brought, humming softly to herself, while Marcus nursed a coffee and tried to calculate whether he could afford to add fries to their shared burger. The woman came in alone, and Marcus noticed her immediately, though not for the reasons one might expect. She was elegant in a way that seemed out of place in Ruby's fluorescent lighting, wearing a simple gray coat that probably cost more than his monthly rent. But it wasn't her appearance that caught his attention. It was the fear in her eyes as she glanced over her shoulder, the way her hands trembled as she slid into a booth near the back exit. Minutes later, the man arrived. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore an expensive suit that looked absurdly formal for a roadside diner. His face was flushed with anger, and he moved through the restaurant with the confidence of someone used to getting what he wanted. Marcus watched as the man approached the woman's booth and leaned over the table, his voice low but sharp enough to carry. "You think you can just leave after everything I've done for you?" The man's hand shot out and grabbed the woman's wrist, pulling her halfway across the table. She let out a small cry of pain, and that was all it took. Marcus didn't think. He simply moved. Years of protecting Emma, of being the only barrier between his daughter and a world that could be cruel and unforgiving, had honed his instincts. Before he knew what he was doing, he was standing beside the man's table, his heart pounding, but his voice steady. "Sir, I think you need to let her go." The man turned, his eyes narrowing as he took in Marcus's worn work jacket, his calloused hands, the exhaustion etched into his face. "This doesn't concern you. Mind your own business." "I am minding my business," Marcus said quietly. "My daughter is sitting right over there, and I'm trying to teach her that when someone needs help, you help them. So I'm going to ask you again, please let the lady go." For a moment, the diner seemed to hold its breath. The few other customers stopped eating. The waitress paused mid-pour. Even Emma looked up from her coloring, sensing the tension in her father's voice. The man's grip tightened on the woman's wrist, his jaw clenching. He was bigger than Marcus, younger, and clearly used to intimidating people, but Marcus didn't back down. He'd faced scarier things than an angry man in a nice suit. He'd faced empty bank accounts and his daughter's questions about why mommy left. He'd faced the fear of not being enough day after day, and he was still standing. "You really want to do this?" the man asked, his voice dangerous. "I really want you to let her go." The standoff lasted only seconds, but it felt like hours. Finally, with a curse, the man released the woman's wrist and took a step back. "This isn't over," he spat at her before storming out of the diner, slamming the door hard enough to make the windows rattle. Marcus turned to the woman, who was rubbing her wrist and trying to blink back tears. "Are you okay, ma'am? Do you need me to call someone? The police?" She shook her head quickly, her voice barely above a whisper. No police. It's complicated. But thank you so much." She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card, pressing it into Marcus's hand. "If you ever need anything at all, please." Marcus looked down at the card. It was a simple, cream-colored cardstock with just a name and a phone number, Victoria Chen. He slipped it into his pocket, gave her a small smile, and returned to his booth where Emma was watching him with wide eyes. "Daddy, was that lady in trouble?" Emma asked. "Yeah, sweetheart, but she's okay now." "Because you helped her?" "Because we should always help people when we can." Emma nodded solemnly and went back to her coloring, satisfied with this explanation. Marcus finished his coffee, paid the check with the last of his weekly cash, and drove them home to their small apartment, already thinking about tomorrow's early shift. He forgot about the business card entirely. 3 days later, Marcus was replacing a broken light switch in their kitchen when someone knocked on the door. It was Saturday afternoon, and Emma was at her friend's birthday party. Marcus wasn't expecting anyone. When he opened the door, he found himself face to face with a man in an immaculate chauffeur uniform, complete with cap and white gloves. "Mr. Marcus Reed?" asked the man in a crisp British accent. "That's me," Marcus said, confused. "Can I help you?" "Actually, sir, I'm here to help you. My name is James, and I work for Mrs. Victoria Chen. She asked me to deliver this to you personally." He held out a thick envelope. Marcus took it, his hands leaving dusty fingerprints on the cream-colored paper. Inside was a letter written in elegant script and a check that made his knees go weak. $50,000. "There must be some mistake," Marcus stammered, trying to hand it back. James smiled kindly. "No mistake, sir. Mrs. Chen was very specific. She wanted you to know that your kindness at the diner meant to her more than you could possibly understand. She was leaving an abusive relationship that night, and if you hadn't intervened, she believes things would have ended very differently." Marcus's hands shook as he looked at the check again. $50,000. It was more money than he'd ever seen in one place. It was enough to pay off his credit card debt, to fix his car that had been running on prayers for 6 months, to put something away for Emma's college fund. It was enough to breathe, really breathe for the first time in years. "I didn't do it for money," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." "Mrs. Chen knows that," Marcus replied. "That's exactly why she wanted to do this. The world doesn't have enough people like you, Mr. Reed, people who stand up for strangers without expecting anything in return." He reached into his jacket and pulled out another envelope, this one smaller. "She also wanted me to give you this." Marcus opened the other envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was another letter, this one more personal. "Dear Marcus, I've spent my entire life surrounded by wealth and power, but that night at the diner, I learned something valuable. True character isn't measured by what you have, but by what you're willing to give when you have nothing to spare. You gave me your courage when I had none left. You showed your daughter what it means to be brave and kind. I can never repay that fully, but I hope this helps make your life a little easier. You deserve every good thing. With eternal gratitude, Victoria Chen." Marcus looked up at James, his eyes wet. "Is she okay, Mrs. Chen?" "She's safe now, sir. She has a restraining order, a new home, and she's rebuilding her life. Thanks in no small part to you." After James left, Marcus sat on his worn couch and cried. Not tears of sadness, but of relief, of gratitude, of the overwhelming realization that sometimes the universe does notice when you do the right thing, that sometimes kindness does come back to you, even when you never expected it to. When he picked up Emma from the birthday party that evening, she was buzzing with excitement about cake and games. As they drove home in their sputtering car, Marcus looked at his daughter in the rearview mirror and made a silent promise. This money wouldn't just change their lives, it would be a reminder, always, that choosing kindness matters, that standing up for others even when it's hard, even when it costs you something, is never the wrong choice. "Daddy, you're smiling," Emma observed from the back seat. "I am, sweetheart. I'm just thinking about how lucky we are." "Because of the lady you helped?" "Because we have each other, and because we know what really matters." That night, after Emma was asleep, Marcus sat at their small kitchen table and wrote his own letter to Victoria Chen. He thanked her for her generosity, but more than that, he thanked her for reminding him that his choices mattered, that raising his daughter to be kind and brave wasn't just about teaching her values, but about living them himself every single day. The check sat on the table beside him, but Marcus barely glanced at it. He was thinking about Ruby's diner, about a scared woman in a gray coat, about the decision to stand up instead of looking away. He was thinking about how close he'd come to just keeping his head down that night, to minding his own business, to teaching Emma that sometimes it's safer to pretend you don't see people in trouble. But he hadn't, and that had made the difference. In the end, Marcus Reed learned what Victoria Chen already knew, that wealth isn't measured in bank accounts, but in the richness of your character, that sometimes the poorest man in the room is the richest where it counts, and that a single moment of courage offered freely to a stranger can change two lives forever. The next morning, Marcus deposited the check and made a list. Bills to pay? Yes. Repairs to make? Absolutely. But also a donation to the local women's shelter, a college fund for Emma, and a small emergency fund for other people at other diners who might need help that he could now afford to give. Because that was the real gift Victoria Chen had given him. Not just the money, but the reminder that the world is full of people who need help and people who can give it. And that Marcus Reed, single father, warehouse worker, and everyday hero, was both. All it took was choosing to care.